Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today.
We're in a time right now where around the world we see an increase of polarization, of extremism, of radicalization everywhere, including in some of the most open liberal democracies in the world. In our elections, in our public discourse, and in mainstream communications, let alone social media, we're seeing a rise in intolerance. We see the organizations of extremist groups on the far right and the far left that are pushing white supremacy, intolerance, radicalization, promoting hatred, fear, and mistrust across borders, but within borders as well.
That was recently re-elected Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau speaking at an international forum on the Holocaust where he conflates white supremacists with the far left. Which, if we're apparently the same, then why were the Proud Boys declared a domestic terrorist organization, but Antifa or BLM weren't? That's a rhetorical question. No, we're not going to pick that apart. But it's just peak liberalism and centrism to say both these people are equally bad, even though one wants to violently overthrow the government and put many dissidents against the wall. The far right are not going to support things like LGBT rights. They're not going to support things like universal dental care and pharmacare or housing affordability. Hell, look at the People's Party of Canada's actual platform. Lots of people were saying, yeah, even though it's just like right-wing nonsense and drivel that is actively destructive. The part of that clip that really gets me is where he says, we see the organization of extremist groups on the far right and the far left that are pushing white supremacy, intolerance, radicalization, promoting fear and mistrust. That's very clearly the right wing. When does the far left promote things like white supremacy, intolerance, and radicalization and fear and mistrust? I mean, unless you're Caleb Maupin, but that's the exception rather than the rule. Most people on the far left are talking about how, hey, white supremacy is very much a thing and it's a problem that impacts many aspects of society, which is why we need to challenge it and actively fight against it and change these systems. And apparently, to good old Trudeau and the Liberal Party, that's apparently just the same as the Proud Boys who would go out into the streets to deliberately fight with people and burn banners and also try and attack the Capitol building like they did on January 6th. Maybe Trudeau's forgotten about that time that I think it was a former veteran who rammed his truck into the gate at 24 Sussex, armed with, several firearms and lots of ammo, trying to find Justin Trudeau to kill him because he's part of the deep state conspiracy or whatever. And how it was the right wing who were throwing gravel at him while he was recently campaigning across the country. Meanwhile, the exact same terrible far left would be like, actually, I'm going to vote NDP or Communist Party. Go fuck yourself. Totally the same thing! Anyway, this is where we are, where the man in charge is saying these openly just terrible and false things. Who's the one promoting fear and mistrust again, Mr. Trudeau? And I guess this means we also have to talk again about Bill C-10 and how, we got to really clamp down on that. And I also remind people that recently in America, there was also Biden's administration widening the definition of domestic terrorism and different kinds of activism that may be prosecutable under that new definition. And it is also worth noting that the Canadian Anti-Hate Network has the following to say about, the status of the Proud Boys being a domestic terror organization and how that may have had repercussions for the future. The future being now, of course. Back on February 3rd, they posted this. We have previously expressed concern that the definition of a terrorist entity would have to change or the bar be lowered to list the Proud Boys on the basis that a loosened definition could be exploited to target BIPOC or anti-racist groups in the future. And here's Justin Trudeau basically trying to manufacture consent saying the far right is just as bad as the far left and vice versa. There's no real difference. You just need to be a centrist and uphold the power structures. And that's really what this is about at the end of the day. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals and the Conservatives, they absolutely want to punish the far left because that actually represents a threat to their power and the ruling class, whereas the far right does not. The far right will always make a big deal about, we got to get rid of corruption. We're going to drain the swamp. They had 4 years of this, and look, things are just objectively worse in all cases. With the rise of fascism, the ruling class is still very firmly ensconced. With the far left, it is absolutely broken down and dismantled. That's why the far left is far more of a threat to the ruling class and the elites, of which Justin Trudeau is very much a member of, and we'll see lots of government efforts to actively try and subvert them, whereas the right wing and the far right is just, whatever, the ruling class can still work with that, that's fine. So whatever you do, don't buy into the nonsense, if you were even considering in the first place, that the far left and the far right are anywhere near the same. And it is so incredibly disappointing, though not altogether surprising, to see a liberal prime minister in Canada try and push that false narrative. And that is definitely what's bothering me today.